Get rid of this pitiful woman right away. Victoria's voice cut like a razor across the opulent ballroom. She has no place among these successful individuals. As I stood motionless close to the entrance to the main ballroom of the Grandview Hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina, the champagne flute shuddered in my palm. Wearing my best blue dress and grinning sincerely, I had just arrived for what was supposed to be my husband Trevor's company celebration. Rather, I found myself listening to a discussion that completely contradicted my preconceived notions about my 20-year marriage. You can call me Simone Delgado. I just learned that my 48-year-old husband's business associates and, reportedly, his lover viewed me as nothing more than dead weight. Continuing her show for the little audience gathered around her was Victoria Sterling, a blonde woman in her 30s with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. The group surrounding her included a few faces I recognized from Trevor's office. "That's the worthless wife who holds Trevor back," she said with practiced cruelty, pointing to me without even looking at me. "If he had any sense, he would have divorced her years ago. She contributes absolutely nothing to his success." People who had grinned at me at Christmas parties and company picnics. Now, with looks that ranged from amused to uneasy, they nodded in agreement with Victoria's judgment. My cheeks burned with shame, but I felt something deeper stirring within me. These folks didn't know who they were referring to. With his arm slipping possessively around Victoria's waist, Trevor materialized by her side. I realized that this was more than office gossip or a passing transgression as I saw him draw her in close while she kept making fun of me. This was a woman who was at ease enough to openly degrade his wife, and he stood by and let it happen. Trevor spoke the words, "Simone shouldn't even be here," but not quietly enough. "It's a business gathering." His remarks struck me like a blow to the body. He talked about me as though I were an unwanted intrusion on his success after 20 years of marriage. I nearly chuckled at how cruel the irony was. If only they were aware of the true source of Trevor's success, the person who had quietly supported every significant agreement, growth, and victory they were commemorating this evening. I quietly made my way to the exit, setting my champagne flute down on a nearby table. No conflict, no scene, no tears. I noticed Trevor's remorseful look and Victoria's smug smirk as I walked by their group. The tempest they had just unleashed was unknown to any of them. Somehow, the twilight air felt cleaner outside. And I was already planning as I drove back to our Mears Park home. More significantly, the drive home allowed me to recall exactly who I was before I became Trevor's wife, which allowed me to digest what I had seen. I used to be Simone Delgado, a brilliant businesswoman who transformed a tiny consulting firm into a multimillion-dollar company 25 years ago. Trevor was a mid-level manager at Christensen Global, a faltering manufacturing company drowning in debt and making bad choices when I first met him at a networking event in 1999. Our courtship had been a fast-paced romance interspersed with meetings to discuss company strategies. Trevor was affable, driven, and in dire need of someone who knew how to handle tricky financial situations. I thought his talent was obvious and his excitement charming. I made what I believed to be a romantic gesture when we got married in 2004. Through a shell corporation I owned, I covertly contributed $12 million of my own funds to Christ Global, acquiring a 30% share. Trevor was unaware of my complete involvement. He thought the unidentified hedge fund was the enigmatic investor who had saved his business. At first, I liked it that way because I believed that love, not business commitments, should be the foundation of our marriage. I kept directing strategic counsel and more funding through middlemen as Christensen Global expanded over the years from a failing manufacturer to a prosperous logistics and supply chain management business. Velwick Solutions, my own consulting firm, kept growing on its own. I had developed a clientele of Fortune 500 businesses looking for advice on corporate restructuring, mergers, and acquisitions. I made more than enough money from the hard but rewarding labor to sustain my lifestyle and my covert investments in Trevor's business. In retrospect, I saw how foolish I had been to believe Trevor would appreciate my efforts after he found them. Rather, over the years, he had become more contemptuous of my profession, calling my consultancy office play, and advising me to concentrate more on advancing his career. The most agonizing aspect was that he had started to accept his own rewritten past, according to which he was solely responsible for his achievement. There was still no sign of Trevor's Mercedes when I turned into our driveway. He was most likely still there, enjoying the accolades for accomplishments made possible by my funding and strategic direction. Victoria was probably still there, too, acting as the encouraging friend she thought she was meant to be. I went directly to my home office after unlocking the front door. Before my 20 years of marriage came to an end, I took back everything that was properly mine tonight. Trevor had made a crucial mistake. He had forgotten that the woman who owned the keys to his entire empire was the same one he was so desperate to get rid of. My home office had always been my haven, where I carried out the tasks that Trevor and his coworkers so casually disregarded. It became my battle room tonight. I turned on my PC and took out the safe documents I stored in a locked cabinet. Documents that Trevor had never even considered looking at, let alone bothered to inquire for. The story in the documents would have taken everyone at that party by surprise. Velwick Solutions was more than just my own consulting business. It was the parent business of the enigmatic hedge fund Shadow Creek Investments, which held 30% of Christensen Global. My further investments over the last 20 years have raised that holding to 42%. The biggest individual investor in my husband's business. The picture was even more bleak from the financial records. There was almost $800,000 in the joint accounts that Trevor and I shared. He was unaware, however, that I had been providing the funds for those accounts. His salary from Christensen Global had been meager at best, and my consultancy income had sustained our opulent lifestyle. The cost-cutting techniques I had discreetly supplied through my business contacts were even responsible for his recent bonus, which they were celebrating tonight. I launched my laptop and started logging into our joint bank accounts. It was an easy first step. I moved all of the money into my own business account from our combined checking and savings accounts. There were a few keystrokes that moved $837,000. About $15,000 from Trevor's most recent paycheck was in his personal account. Then, in spite of the late hour, I called my company lawyer, Harrison Webb. Harrison was used to handling urgent situations because he had managed my company affairs for more than 15 years. On the second ring, he answered Simone. "This is not what was intended. Is everything okay?" "Harrison, I need you to get the paperwork ready for a few things right away. First, as of tomorrow morning, I would like to sell my Christensen Global share. 42%. I want Drathorn Industries, their main rival, to purchase it." A pause occurred. "That is an important choice. Could you tell me what caused this?" "I'm ending my marriage and distancing myself from Trevor's business dealings. I'm withdrawing my contributions entirely because he has made it apparent that he doesn't value them." "I get it. Drathorn will probably seize the chance to purchase that interest. They would have a great deal of control over Christensen Global's business operations. Do you need anything else?" "Terminate the Meridian Project Agreement." Velwick Solutions was scheduled to offer $2 in consulting services. Next quarter, Christensen Global will receive $5 million. I want the contract to end right away. Think of it as finished. Is there anything else? Yes, tomorrow afternoon I would like my divorce papers to be prepared and served. I'll email you the specifics, but I need this resolved as soon as possible. I sat back in my chair and gave myself a moment of satisfaction after hanging up the phone. Over the course of half an hour, I had successfully destroyed Trevor's financial base. He would learn tomorrow that his enigmatic investor had been his wife all along and that she had just given his fiercest rival the ability to demolish everything he had worked so hard to achieve. The following morning was unusually clear. To my astonishment, considering the enormity of what I had started, I slept better than I had in months. 7 a.m. I was looking over the last of the documents Harrison had provided me that evening while wearing one of my nicest business outfits. The divorce filing, contract cancellations, and divestment paperwork were all in order. Since 6 in the morning, my phone had been vibrating with Trevor's missed calls, but I chose to ignore them. By now, when his morning coffee order was rejected, he would have learned of the empty bank accounts. I pictured his bewilderment escalating to worry when he discovered our joint accounts were entirely depleted when he checked them online. At precisely 9 in the morning, the chief executive officer of Kristen Global, Gerald Morrison, called me when my phone rang. Gerald had never guessed my actual contribution to his company's success, but he had always been courteous to me at business events. "Simone," Gerald spoke in a strained tone, "I have to talk to you immediately. Would you be able to visit today?" "Gerald, of course. Is everything okay?" "This morning, we got some surprising news. It has to do with the ownership structure of the business. Trevor has arrived, and to be honest, we're all rather perplexed by some happenings." I looked at my watch. At the market opening, Harrison would have delivered the divestment documents to Drather Industries. The leadership of Christensen Global would by now be aware that their biggest shareholder had sold their interest to their main rival. I promised to be there in an hour. I had time to get ready for what was sure to be a contentious meeting during the journey to Christensen Global's headquarters. For 20 years, I had seen Trevor claim the credit for accomplishments that my funding and direction had enabled. He was going to find out today who had actually been in charge. Trevor was waiting in the lobby of the modern downtown office building when I got there. His normally flawless hair was unkempt, and his face was flushed. He came running over as soon as he saw me. His voice reverberated in the marble-lined room as he shouted, "Simone, what the hell did you do? The bank accounts are empty, and Gerald is saying something insane about our primary investor selling to Drathorn. This has to be some kind of mistake." I looked him in the eyes. "Trevor, there's no error. I sold my interest in Christensen Global since I no longer wanted to be associated with the company, and I cleared out our accounts as they were financed by my income." His face turned white. "What are you discussing? What's at risk for you? You have no ownership stake in Kristen Global?" "Up until this morning, I actually owned 42%. The enigmatic hedge fund that saved your business 2 decades ago is called Shadow Creek Investments. Trevor, that was me. I provided the funding and direction for each significant capital infusion and strategy choice that helped this business turn around." Trevor looked at me like I had said something in a language he didn't understand. "That isn't feasible. You work as an advisor. That type of money is not yours. Before I met you, I turned Velwick Solutions into a multimillion-dollar company. I was already successful as a mid-level manager while you were having trouble. Because I thought we were partners, I continued to support your business after investing in it because I had faith in you. I was wrong, and I discovered it last night. Security personnel were on their way, most likely summoned by someone who had observed our heated exchange in the foyer." Trevor's hold on my arm was so firm that it caused bruises. Desperately, "You can't do this to me," he said. "This is my firm. Victoria was simply talking last night, and she didn't mean anything." I released my arm. The elevator ride to Gerald's office was the longest Trevor had ever taken, based on his increasingly agitated expressions, but I stayed calm, even peaceful. 20 years of repressed frustration and hidden resentment were finally being released, and the feeling was intoxicating. "No, Trevor, it was my company. Now, it belongs to Drather Industries, and they're going to do whatever they want with it. Including, I suspect, removing executives who can't justify their positions." Normally Gerald Morrison's corner office, with its expansive view of Charlotte's skyline, was a place of respect, but today the air was heavy with tension. Victoria Sterling, who had been sitting near the window, looked up when we walked in. Her face a mask of barely controlled anxiety. "Simone," Gerald started cautiously. "I've been trying to understand the situation. This morning we received notification that Shadow Creek Investments had sold their 42% stake in Kristen Global to Drather Industries, which is unprecedented." James Fletcher, the chief financial officer, who was pacing next to Gerald's desk, added, "It's also devastating. They could force a merger, dissolve key contracts, and even restructure our entire leadership team. Trevor sank into a chair, his face pallid. Drathorn now controls nearly half our company. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder that contained 20 years of documentation, the financial records of every investment Shadow Creek made in Christus and Global, along with the strategic recommendations that accompanied each capital injection. Simone, please tell them that this is some sort of misunderstanding. You cannot possibly be Shadow Creek Investments. It's because I wrote them, I said simply. Shadow Creek Investments was my way of supporting Trevor's career without damaging his pride. Gerald looked over the documents, his eyes widening as he recognized financial strategies that had been implemented over the years. These projections, these market analyses, they're identical to the reports Shadow Creek provided. How is this possible? Because I wrote them. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Victoria finally responded, her voice no longer confident. You're saying you've been secretly controlling this company for 20 years, and I realize now how foolish that was, the successful wife secretly funding her husband's dreams. I looked directly at her. You called me a worthless wife who does nothing to help Trevor succeed last night. There's a difference between supporting and controlling, but I don't expect you to see it. You said I should be taken out of his life, and I did. Trevor jolted to his feet, his chair scuffing the floor. This is crazy. You can't ruin my whole career over something Victoria said at a party. James Fletcher was still going over the financial documents. The Meridian project contract was also cancelled this morning. Velwick Solutions was supposed to provide consulting services worth $2.5 million, which was supposed to be our largest contract next quarter. I'm not ruining your career, Trevor. I'm just taking my contributions out of it. If your career can't survive without my money and guidance, then maybe it wasn't as solid as you thought. I have confirmed that Velwick Solutions will no longer be working with Christus and Global in any capacity. Gerald cleared his throat. I know you're upset, Simone, but I'm sure we can work something out. This company employs over 300 people. The repercussions of Drathor's acquisition will be severe. You're right, Gerald. It will be severe. I glanced at Trevor and Victoria. You vindictive witch, you're ruining innocent people's livelihoods because your feelings were hurt. I smiled at her, the same serene smile I'd worn while emptying the bank accounts. No, Victoria. I'm just taking back what was always mine. The innocent people you're worried about will land on their feet, but the guilty ones might find the landing a little rougher. I'm not responsible for cleaning up messes I didn't make. Victoria's composure finally broke. Victoria had moved to stand behind Trevor, her hand on his shoulder in a gesture that might have looked supportive if her face hadn't been twisted with barely controlled rage, and Trevor sat slumped in his chair, staring at the financial documents as if they might somehow change before his eyes. The silence in Gerald's office stretched uncomfortably as the full implications of my actions set in. I need to ask directly, Simone. Is there any way to reverse this? Can you buy back the stake from Drathorn? Gerald broke the stillness. First, even if I wanted to, which I don't, Drathorn has already started making changes. They've been waiting for this kind of opportunity for years. They'll have their own management team in place by next week and have begun reorganizing operations to fit their business plan. James Fletcher looked up from his calculator. We're looking at possible layoffs within the next 60 days, with Drathorn controlling our operations and without the Meridian project contract. The numbers don't work anymore. Trevor finally found his voice. Simone, please. I know last night was awful, but this affects everyone. I calmly said, these people are innocent. Are they? And then I took out my phone and navigated to the audio recording I had made the night before. Victoria, would you like to hear your own words from last night's celebration? Victoria's face became white. You filmed us? I legally recorded a public conversation in a public place, and when I hit play, Victoria's voice filled the office. That's Trevor's lousy wife, whom he would have divorced years ago if he had any common sense. She does nothing at all to help him succeed. Trevor's voice then added, "Simone shouldn't even be here," as the recording went on. "It's a business gathering." As Gerald listened, his face grew serious. I have recordings of several more discussions from that evening, and James Fletcher shook his head in what seemed to be disgust. These were their colleagues hearing for the first time exactly how Trevor and Victoria had described me in front of the entire leadership team. Trevor sprang up suddenly. "Those individuals don't know what they're talking about." I carried on chats with other staff about how I was dead weight and how Trevor would be better off without me. Apparently, this opinion has been accumulating for quite some time. They don't comprehend our predicament. You're correct, Trevor. They don't realize that their bonuses were funded by the profits from the methods I created, or that their jobs were made possible by my money. Look, maybe I said some things I shouldn't have. I was drinking, and the conversation got out of hand. Victoria stepped forward, her former anxiety replaced by desperation. They don't realize that the dead weight they were mocking was actually the foundation holding up their entire company. One stupid comment, though, isn't enough to ruin an entire business. One comment. I laughed, and the sound wasn't pleasant. "Victoria, you've been poisoning Trevor against me for months, publicly humiliating his current wife while posing as his future wife. Last night wasn't an isolated incident, it was the culmination of a pattern." I gathered my papers and got up to go. "I'll be serving divorce papers this afternoon, Trevor. When Drathorn restructures, your salary from Kristen Global will probably vanish, and as you'll find out, all of our other assets were bought with my money. I advise you to find a good lawyer, but I'm not sure how you'll pay for one." Trevor frantically called out as I got to the door, "What about the house? How about our retirement funds? You'll discover that very little of what you thought was ours was actually legally yours. The house is in my name, and my income was used to pay the retirement funds." I took one last look back. "You might want to call Victoria's parents. I believe you're going to need somewhere to stay at." I waited to let that sink in. I returned home around 11 a.m., and the sense of freedom was tremendous. The house felt different now, not like a shared space I had to navigate diplomatically, but like my sanctuary, and I walked through each room, mentally cataloging what belonged to me and what Trevor might try to claim. The artwork, the furniture, even his precious home theater system, all were bought with my income, while he contributed his meager salary to what he believed were our joint expenses. 20 years of repressed frustration and hidden resentment had been released in the space of 18 hours, and I felt lighter than I had felt in decades. Harrison Webb called at noon with an update: "Every asset bought with your income has been legally secured." Trevor's personal belongings are limited to his clothes, his car, and approximately $15,000 in his personal checking account. Everything else belongs to you. The divorce papers have been served, and Trevor was still at his office, reportedly in meetings with Drathorn representatives, according to the process server, who said he looked quite shaken when he received them. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, and I poured myself a glass of wine, a 2015 Bordeaux that was more expensive than Trevor's monthly car payment, and let myself enjoy the moment. For 20 years, I had been the silent partner, the hidden supporter, the woman behind the man. Now, Trevor would find out what life looked like without that support. Even in text form, I could sense Victoria's vengeful tone, so I responded back, "You're right. This isn't over. You've made a huge mistake. It's not finished yet. It's only the beginning." After blocking the number, I sat down in my favorite chair and watched the afternoon play out. 3 p.m. In my driveway, I heard a car door smash. I saw Trevor stumbling out of his Mercedes through the window, his face hot and his movements erratic. After getting the divorce papers, he had likely been drinking at a bar downtown. Victoria got out of the passenger seat, trying to keep up with his unpredictable speed while her high-end heels clicked wildly on the street. The front door was pounded by Trevor. "Now, Simone, open this door. We must speak." I casually sat there, drinking wine and watching on my phone's security camera feed. Every gesture, every yelled demand, showed how desperate Trevor was. This man had recently come to the realization that his whole existence had been predicated on an incomprehensible foundation. With a shout, "I know you're in there," Victoria added, her voice harsh with desperation, "you can't just destroy everything we've built together." I picked up my phone and rang 911. "This is crazy. You're going to regret this. One foolish remark doesn't ruin a marriage. I want to report 2 individuals who were causing a public disturbance and trespassing on my property. They're becoming drunk and acting more hostile." In a matter of minutes, I could hear distant sirens. When Trevor and Victoria realized the cops were coming, their yelling became more intense. I saw Trevor's face through the window as it went through phases of incredulity, anger, and finally the growing recognition that his old existence was really over. The policemen were proficient and well-mannered. They verified that I was the only owner of the property, verified my identity, and then walked Trevor and Victoria to their car, warning them not to go back without legal counsel. Trevor's face smashed against the passenger glass in a last frantic motion as I watched them drive away. It was a feeling I hadn't had in years. All authority over my own life. The events of that night had changed the course of several lives in Charlotte's business community 6 months later. During Drather Industries' reorganization of Christus and Global, Trevor was fired. Without the covert assistance he was unaware of, his job was terminated as unnecessary, and his performance history could not sustain his pay. Financial strain and blame-sharing caused Victoria and Trevor's relationship to fall apart, leaving her unable to keep up the lifestyle she had become used to while dating a man she thought was independently wealthy. James Fletcher retired early after his health problems from stress became intolerable, but Gerald Morrison and a number of other executives were able to secure jobs with other organizations, albeit at much lower pay. For my part, I turned Velwick Solutions into an even more prosperous business, freed from the weight of covertly supporting someone else's aspirations while my own efforts went unnoticed. My desire for vengeance went beyond simply getting my money back or revealing their brutality. It was about at last being the successful woman I had always been, without hiding or apologizing for my accomplishments to stroke the brittle ego of others.